Welcome to Professor English Academy. British English in 4 minutes. The fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn English. Hi, I'm Isabella. Nice to meet you. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn new, more common ways to ask and answer the question, how are you? In English. You've probably learned how are you? And I'm fine in textbooks before, but in the United Kingdom, people will usually ask this question and answer it in a different way. First, let's review. If someone says how are you? You can say I'm fine, thanks. I'm fine, thanks. Here are some other ways to answer. I'm good, thanks. This means about the same as I'm fine, thanks. I'm good, thanks. We also have not too bad. You can use this if you are feeling just okay or as oh, not too bad. Let's look at our question again. How are you? This is the most well-known way of asking how someone is. You could use it when you want to be polite. But now, let's look at some different ways to ask how someone is. These ways are more casual and much more common. First, hi, how are you doing? Hi, how are you doing? Or, hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? Or, in an especially casual situation, you could say, you all right? You all right? What if you're not doing all right? Although it's the British way to say you're doing fine even if you're not, if you feel comfortable with the other person, you could also choose to tell them when you're not doing fine. You could say, not so good. Not so good. Not great. Not great. Or, I've been better. I've been better. Be careful. If you say one of these, the other person will usually ask why? What's wrong? Then you will have to explain. However, if you're feeling particularly well, you could answer more enthusiastically. Fantastic. Fantastic. Fabulous. Fabulous. Or even, I'm very well indeed. I'm very well indeed. Now it's time for Gina's tips. Because of the popularity and influence of American film and media, some American phrases have become common in the United Kingdom as well. How are you doing? Was originally an American phrase, but these days, you can hear it on either side of the pond. Do you know the difference between what do you do and what are you doing? It's a little tricky, but I'll explain it simply in the next British English in 4 minutes lesson. See you next time. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask what someone's job is in natural English. Of course, you can just say, what is your job? This is correct English, but it sounds too direct and awkward. Native English speakers almost never say this in a social situation. Instead, they use a different question. But before we master that, we need to compare it to a very similar question. What are you doing? I'm presenting a video about English. What do you do? I'm an English teacher. Do you see the difference? These two questions, what are you doing? And what do you do? Sound similar but mean different things. The first one is asking what you are doing right now, this minute. You answer it using an ing verb. What are you doing? I'm reading. I'm watching TV. While the second is actually a shortened version of what do you do for a living. This is how we ask what is your job? In natural English. Let's practice this question. What do you do? What do you do? When native speakers of English ask this question, it can come out very fast and sound more like what do you do? In order to tell it apart from what are you doing? Just listen for the ing sound on the end of the question. If it's not there, then you're being asked what your job is. So, how would you answer this question? Just think of it as if the other person is asking you what is your job? You could answer with I'm and then your job. I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. Or, I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer. If you want to learn more job names, go to Professor English Academy and check out the core word lists. These cover job vocabulary and more, and include a picture and audio to help perfect your pronunciation. You can also mention the place that you work at, starting with I work at. I work at a hospital. I work at a hospital. I work at a law firm. I work at a law firm. If you work for a big company that is well known, you can say I work for and then the name. I work for Barclays Bank. I work for Barclays Bank. I work for the BBC. I work for the BBC. Now it's time for Gina's tips. When you ask the question, what do you do? And the other person tells you their job, it's polite to make some kind of positive comment about his or her job. For example, how interesting, or that must be exciting, or even, oh, really? Remember to sound sincere. Do you know how native English speakers ask each other what their hobbies are? Here's a hint. We don't use the word hobby. Find out next time in the third English in 4 minutes lesson. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask what someone's hobbies are without using the word hobbies. You've probably seen the question, do you have any hobbies? Or what are your hobbies? In an English textbook before. However, native English speakers almost never use the word hobbies when asking about them. A much more natural way to ask the same question is, what do you do for fun? What do you do for fun? You can also ask, what do you do in your spare time? What do you do in your spare time? So, how would you answer this question? Let's look at how native speakers would do it. The easiest way is to say I like to, or just I like followed by what you like to do. For example, if you like watching films, you could say, I like to watch films. Or, I like watching films. I like to watch films. Or, I like watching films. And if you like golf, you could say, I like to play golf. Or, I like playing golf. I like to play golf. Or, I like playing golf. You can emphasize how much you like your hobby by adding a word like really in front of like. For example, I really like watching films. On the other hand, if you want to play down how much you like something, you can say kind of. For example, I kind of like playing tennis. Now it's time for Gina's tips. If you don't have any special hobbies or you don't want to be specific, a good way to reply is I like spending time with my friends and stuff like that. I like spending time with my friends and stuff like that. Just use I like and add spending time with my friends and then add and stuff like that. How do you answer the question, where are you from? It doesn't even have a verb. We'll cover this and more in the next British English in 4 minutes lesson. This series explains some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn some different ways people will ask you where are you from? First though, where are you from? Can mean many different things. It can mean which city are you from? Or which country are you from? In fact, Brits ask this question to each other all the time to learn which part of the UK the other person comes from. If you want to answer this question, there are two ways to do it. You can say I'm and then your nationality, as in, I'm Japanese, or I'm Brazilian. Or you can say I'm from and then the country you are from, as in, I'm from Italy, or I'm from Thailand. If you're from a really famous city or place, you can say that too. For example, I'm from Beijing or I'm from New Delhi. Of course, in the United Kingdom, as in other parts of the world, people may be a little more indirect because they want to be polite. To do this, they might ask you if you are from the place where they met you. For example, if you meet someone in London, they might ask, "Are you from London?" Or if you are in York, they might ask, "Are you from York?" Many parts of the United Kingdom are very multicultural, so asking the question this way avoids what could be an embarrassing mistake. You can answer this the same way you answer "Where are you from?" Just add a simple no in front. For example, you can say, "No, I'm," and then your nationality. "No, I'm French." Or "No, I'm from," and then your country. "No, I'm from Russia." Now it's time for Gina's tips. The UK is a diverse place. People you meet may take great pride in the place or region they come from. If you ask someone about where they're from, they may respond by saying something like Yorkshire, Lancashire, or Hertfordshire. If they answer in this way, it usually means they are interested in talking more about their region and how it differs from others. In this lesson, we learned some different ways to ask "Where are you from?" Do you know what to ask when you don't know someone's name? Of course you do. But what do you say when you've forgotten someone's name? Find out in the next British English in 4 minutes lesson. See you next time. Want to speak real English from your first lesson? Sign up for your free lifetime account at Professor English Academy. Welcome to Professor English Academy. British English in 3 minutes. The fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn English. Hey everyone, I'm Gina. This series will teach you some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn some new ways to ask someone "What's your name?" including one that you can use when you've forgotten someone's name. Now, "What's your name?" was probably one of the first questions you learned when you started studying English. I have to tell you though, that most native speakers of English would never say this. In English, just like in other languages, it is often more polite to be a little indirect. Of course, the easiest way to avoid asking the question directly is not to ask at all. Just introduce yourself, and most people will respond by doing the same. When introducing yourself, simple is nearly always best. Just say, "Hi, I'm Gina." To show that you want to know the other person's name, just add an "you" at the end. "Hi, I'm Gina. And you?" "Hi, I'm Gina. And you?" Just like before, take out my name, Gina, and put your name in its place. After you say this, the person will tell you his or her name. Okay, now let's talk about an embarrassing situation that happens to everybody. You've already met somebody once before, but you've forgotten their name. The most polite thing to do in this situation is to apologize and ask again. There's a simple way to do this that's also polite. "I'm sorry, what was your name again?" "I'm sorry, what was your name again?" This sentence is very similar to "What's your name?" but it has 4 important differences. First, we say "I'm sorry." A small apology can go a long way. After that, we say "What was your name?" This is just like what is your name? But instead of is, we use the past tense was. This is really important, as it tells the other person that you remember meeting them. You haven't forgotten him or her. You've just forgotten the name. This little word makes all the difference. I'm sorry, what was your name? Finally, we add again to the end. This is another hint that tells the other person that you remember learning his or her name before, but you just can't recall it right now. I'm sorry, what was your name again? This phrase is appropriate for both formal and informal situations. Now it's time for Gina's tips. In the United Kingdom, it's normal to address people by name in conversation more than once. In both formal and informal situations, it's a way to show respect or interest in the other person and can help you make friends. It is also a great way to practice someone's name so you don't forget it. If you are talking to someone named Andy, for example, instead of just "What do you do for fun?" you could say, "Andy, what do you do for fun?" You can also put the name at the end of the sentence. What do you do for fun, Andy? You don't want to say the person's name too often, or it will sound a little strange. But if you practice someone's name like this, you won't forget it. And people love to hear their own name. In this lesson, we learned what to say when we forget someone's name. In the next lesson, you'll learn what to say when you want to get in touch with someone, whether by telephone, email, or even newer ways to communicate. What's your favorite? Let us know in the comments and join us for the next British English in 4 minutes lesson. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn some ways to get in touch with someone after you've met them once already. In a lot of textbooks, you've probably seen the question, "What's your phone number?" It's a very useful question, but there are 2 problems with it. Firstly, it can sound a little too direct, especially when talking to members of the opposite sex. And secondly, people use the phone a lot less these days than they used to. Instead, they might prefer to connect by email or on a social network like Facebook. To start with, though, a simple variation on "What's your phone number?" That sounds a little less direct is "Could I get your number?" Could I get your number? We start the sentence with could, which softens the request. Next, say I, then get, and finally your number, which is short for your phone number. This question is slightly casual, but it can be used in almost any situation. These days, many people prefer to use email rather than the phone to communicate. Asking someone for his or her email address is also a little less direct than asking for their phone number. Could I get your email address? Could I get your email address? We just took "Could I get your number?" and replaced number with email address. It's that simple. Could I get your email address? If someone asks you either of these questions, you can reply by saying, "Of course, my phone number is." "Of course, my phone number is." "Of course, my email address is." "Of course, my email address is." Or, "Of course, it's," and then say your phone number or email address at the end. Recently, many people have started to use social networks like Facebook or LinkedIn or online chat services like Skype to communicate. People might ask you about these, especially if they are younger. If someone wants to connect with you through one of these services, they may simply ask, "Are you on?" followed by the name of the service. Are you on Facebook? Are you on Facebook? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on Skype? Are you on Skype? To answer, You can simply say, yes, I am, or no, I'm not. If you respond with yes, I am, the other person may ask how they can connect with you on one of these services. But if you answer with no, I'm not, they won't be able to contact you. If you still would like to stay in touch with the person, you can say no, but my email address is, or no, but my phone number is, and then say your email address or phone number. By telling the other person a different way they can contact you, you'll show them that you want to hear from them. Now it's time for Gina's tips. If you ask someone for their phone number, their email address, or some other form of contact information, they will usually give it to you if you've gotten to know them a little beforehand. If you ask them too early in the conversation, though, they may be hesitant about sharing that information. The key is to make sure you talk for some time before requesting this kind of personal information. In this lesson, we learned how to ask for a person's contact information. In the next British English in 4 minutes lesson, you'll learn another good way to get to know a person. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask and say where you live. Usually, someone will ask you where you live as a polite question after they've asked you your name, where you're from, and what you do for a living. They'll say, so, where do you live? This is inviting you to keep making conversation. There are lots of ways you could answer this question, but here are some of the most common. You could say, do you know, and then the name of the area you live in. Do you know County Durham? Or you could mention a local landmark, like near the library or near the cinema. You could also answer by telling the person what train line you live on if your city has a train network, or what station is the nearest to your house. For example, on the Central Line or near Piccadilly. So, as you can see, there are lots of possible ways to answer the question, where do you live? Once you've told them, the other person might respond in one of the following ways. Oh yeah, I know it, or I live near there, or maybe I'm afraid I don't know it. The other person is just being polite by showing interest, so you can reply by saying something like, oh really? A good way to continue the conversation is to ask them the same question in return. You can just say, how about you? Where do you live? Put some stress on the you. Where do you live? Now it's time for Gina's tips. Asking where someone lives is a way to try to find out something you have in common with the person you're talking to. So, if you're familiar with the area the other person lives in, make some comments about it, such as that's a really nice area or the park there is really pretty. Anything is fine as long as you don't say anything negative that could be taken as offensive, like that area has a high crime rate or I hear that area is really dangerous. Do you know how to ask which school someone goes to? Find out in the next British English in 4 minutes lesson. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask someone where they went to school or university. Asking someone where they went to university is a good small talk question and conversation starter. However, you have to be careful not to offend people if they didn't go to university. I'll tell you how to do this. The question is simple. If the other person is over 22, it's likely they will have left university already, so you ask using the past tense. Where did you go to university? The answer to this question is really easy. All you say is, I went to name of the university in city. For example, I went to Imperial College in London. If the name of the city or town is part of the university's name, like Tokyo University or Oxford University, you can add the name of the country instead, I went to Tokyo University in Japan. Once you've heard the other person's answer, it's polite to make some kind of comment, for example, wow, that's a really famous university, or just, oh, really? Sometimes when you ask where did you go to university, the other person might reply, I didn't go to university. In this situation, you should be careful how you reply so as not to appear rude. It's polite to not act surprised but instead make a positive comment like, oh, really? Or ask a question like, did you go straight into a job? Now it's time for Gina's tips. A good follow-up question to keep the conversation going is to ask the other person, what did you study? Or what was your major? This gives them an opportunity to talk about something they're interested in. In the next lesson, you'll learn how to ask another basic question about the other person. Do you have any brothers or sisters? In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask someone about their family, asking whether they have any brothers or sisters. Asking someone about their family is nearly always a good topic of conversation. After all, most people love to talk about their family, right? In some English textbooks, you'll see the question, do you have any siblings? But actually, we rarely use the word siblings in casual spoken English. So, in order to ask this question naturally, all you say is, do you have any brothers or sisters? Remember that in English, we hardly ever say sisters or brothers. It's one of those phrases with a set word order, like black and white. Brothers or sisters? The other person's answer to this question will probably be one of the following. Yeah, I have 2 brothers, or a brother and a sister, or 2 sisters, and so on. Sometimes I'll give details about ages and say something like, yeah, I have 2 younger brothers, or yeah, I have a younger brother and an older sister, and so on. Note that some people say elder instead of older, but they both mean the same thing. If the other person doesn't give details about the ages of his or her brothers and sisters, you can ask a polite follow-up question to show you're interested. Is he or she older or younger than you? Are they older or younger than you? The than you at the end is optional, as it's understood from the context. But what happens if the other person doesn't have any brothers or sisters? There's a set phrase for this in English, and that's I'm an only child. Now it's time for Gina's tips. When someone gives you information like this, and there doesn't seem to be anything else to ask, a good all-purpose reply is to say, oh, really? While nodding or just looking interested. Be careful though, it's really important to sound interested when you say, oh, really? Otherwise, you sound very rude and sarcastic. Do you know how to ask someone if they have a husband, wife, boyfriend, or girlfriend without being rude? In the next lesson, you'll learn how to ask a more personal question in polite English. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask someone quite a personal question. Whether or not they're married or have a boyfriend or girlfriend. This might be useful for the single people out there among you. But it's actually a really common question that comes up when 2 speakers have been chatting for a while. In an English textbook, you may see the question, are you married? However, this is a little blunt and can come across as slightly rude or sound as if you're trying to pick up the other person when, in fact, you just want to find out some more information about him or her. There's a really important little trick you can use to ask this question naturally, and that's to say, are you married? Or, did you notice the or at the end? You stretch out the sound of the or. This has the effect of softening the question and making it sound less direct. Once you've asked this question if the other person is married, the answer will most likely sound like this. Yeah, I've been married for 4 or 5 or 10 years. If you're not married but are engaged, then how would you answer this? Just say, not yet, but I'm engaged. The correct response to this, by the way, is usually, congratulations. If you aren't yet engaged but do have a long-term boyfriend or girlfriend, this is a good opportunity to bring that up. No, but I have a long-term boyfriend or girlfriend. By the way, the word study sometimes comes up in English textbooks, but this is a really old-fashioned way to say long-term, and people don't really use it anymore. But what if you're not married, not engaged, and don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend? Then you can reply, no, I'm single at the moment. This at the moment is another way to soften what you're saying and make it sound less blunt. Now it's time for Gina's tips. As I mentioned at the beginning, this question is a little personal. Make sure you've already been talking a while before moving on to the subject, or it can seem a little forward or too personal. Do you know how to compliment someone on what they're wearing in natural English? In the next British English in 4 minutes lesson, you'll learn how. See you next time. Welcome to Professor English Academy British English in 4 minutes. The fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn English. Hey everyone, I'm Gina. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to compliment someone on what they're wearing. This is a great way to break the ice and to come across as friendly and kind when meeting someone new. If the conversation slows down a little and you can't think of anything to ask, a good way to get it restarted is to compliment the other person. If you don't know them well yet, a safe way to do this is to say something nice about something they're wearing or something they have, like a bag or phone case. The way to do this is to say, I love your bag, or top or shoes, etc. This can sound a little bit feminine, so if you're a guy you could say, I really like your, and then the item. A normal response to this is just, thanks, or if you want to be modest, oh really? Thanks. A great way to follow this up and keep the conversation going is to ask, where did you get it? Or where did you buy it? This gives the other person a chance to talk about the shop, country, or situation in which they bought it, and from there the conversation can develop naturally. If you're complimented and then asked this question, of course the reverse is true, and you have a chance to tell the other person more about the item and where you got it. The usual answer to where did you get it? Or where did you buy it? Is something like, I got it at shop name in town or city. This is appropriate if you bought the item in the country you're currently in, so the other person may know of the store. If you bought it in a different country though, it's usual to say, I got it in country name. You don't need to say the name of the store unless it's world famous, as the other person probably won't have heard of it anyway. Now it's time for Gina's tips. In some cultures, it's considered totally fine and even polite to ask how much something costs. But in most English-speaking countries like the UK, Australia, and America, this is considered very rude and is a question that can only be asked by very close friends. And even then, it's risky. Remember not to say something like, it looks expensive, or how much was it? When you're complimenting something that someone else owns. Have you ever met somebody that you wanted to meet again but didn't know how to take that next step? In the next lesson, you'll learn how. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask someone what they do on weekend evenings and lead up to asking to hang out together sometime. In Lesson 4, we learned how to ask about someone's hobbies in natural English by saying, "What do you do for fun?" Or "What do you do in your spare time?" This lesson's question is a little similar to this but has an important difference. It's for when you want to ask what someone does on weekend evenings, such as going out drinking or dancing. First of all, in English, the most natural way to say go out drinking or dancing and so on is just to say go out, as in, "Did you go out last night?" In context, the other person will know what you mean. In English, it's important not to ask things too directly. If you want to ask someone if they usually go out drinking or dancing on weekends, it's best to say, "What do you usually do on Friday or Saturday nights?" It's a bit long, but the emphasis on Friday or Saturday nights will tell the other person exactly what you mean. You could also say on weekends, but it might sound like you're asking about what they do during the day. Another way to ask this is to use the phrase get up to. This has the implication of doing things that are slightly naughty, like drinking alcohol or going to a club. What do you usually get up to on weekends? Asking the question in this way implies nightlife activities, so you don't need to say Friday or Saturday nights. A few possible responses to this are, "I like going to bars with my friends," "I like going clubbing with my friends," or "I like hanging out with my friends." If you don't like to go out at night, that's fine. All you have to say is, "I don't really like drinking or clubbing, so I just like," and then say whatever you like doing instead. If you don't like drinking alcohol and going to clubs, be careful not to criticize these things too harshly in case the other person gets offended. As we've mentioned before, a handy way to turn the question back on the person asking is just to say, "How about you?" Now it's time for Gina's tips. If you think going for a drink with this new person sounds like fun and you'd like to make an informal invitation, bringing up the topic of what he or she gets up to on weekend evenings is a great way to do this. A natural informal way to do this without pressurizing the other person too much is just to say, "That sounds like fun. We should go together sometime." Do you know how to ask someone about their tastes in music in natural English? In the next lesson, you'll learn how. In this series, you're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask someone what sort of music they like. This is a really common question when two people have been chatting for a little while. In this lesson, you'll learn how to answer this question in several ways. In your English textbook, you may have seen the question, "What kind of music do you like?" This is okay to use, but it can sound a little formal. There's actually a more natural way to ask this using the phrase to be into something, like "What are you into?" This means the same as "What do you like?" So, all you have to do to ask this question is say, "What kind of music are you into?" An alternative to "what kind of" is "what sort of." They both mean exactly the same thing, so you can also say, "What sort of music are you into?" Now, how do you answer this question? An English textbook might tell you to reply with a type or genre of music, like jazz, hip-hop, or R&B. This is okay. You can say something like, "I'm really into hip-hop," or "I really like classical music." Another way to answer, though, is to just say the names of some of the musicians or artists that you like as examples of the type of music you like. For example, "I like Oasis and Queen." In order to level up your casual English, you could add the phrase people like or stuff like in front of the artist's name. "I like people like Annie Lennox and David Bowie." "I like stuff like Coldplay and the Beatles." As we've mentioned before, A handy way to turn the question back on the person asking it is just to say, "How about you?" But when talking about music, it's common for the other person to say something about your tastes, like, "Oh, I like them too," or "I haven't heard of them." So, as you can see, music is a great topic for expanding a conversation with a new person. The expression "I'm really into" can be used with a lot of different things, not just music. You can use it to talk about your hobbies or sports you like to play, as in, "I'm really into tennis," or "I'm really into football." It can be used with people too if you want to say you like a certain person in a romantic sense, but be careful if you use it in this way. How do you get the conversation going when you want to talk about food? If you don't know, find out in our next lesson. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask someone about their taste in food. Food is another great topic for getting to know someone. You might also find out some interesting things about the food culture in the other person's country. Of course, you can ask someone directly, "What kind of food do you like?" Or "What sort of food do you like?" If you ask these questions though, it might seem a little too open. For example, there could be too many answers. This might slow the conversation down. Instead, it's much better to choose a particular food, such as a famous one from your country or one that has come up previously in the conversation, and ask if the other person likes that food. For example, "Do you like fish and chips?" Possible answers to this are, "Yeah, I do." It's then a good chance to expand the conversation a little and say something about the food, why you like it, etc. For example, "Yeah, I do. I like it with mushy peas," or even something simple like, "Yeah, I do. It's delicious." But what if you hate fish and chips? How do you give a negative answer? Again, you have to consider the other person's feelings and not be too critical of the food, even if you hate it more than anything, in case it's their favorite. So, you could say something like, "Not really," or a more idiomatic phrase, "I'm not a huge fan." Again, it's good for the conversation and polite to give a reason why you don't like the food. Some good reasons are, "It's too greasy for me," or simply, "I just don't like the taste of it." Now it's time for Gina's tips. If you meet someone who likes the same kind of food that you do, a nice way to continue the conversation is to ask them if they know any good restaurants that serve the food. Say, for example, that you both like Cornish pasties. You can say, "Do you know a good place for Cornish pasties?" If there's another type of food you are interested in, just take out Cornish pasties and put in the food in a plural form. "Do you know a good place for Sunday roasts?" When you meet people at a party, do you know how to ask them how they know each other? Find out in the next lesson. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 4 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask someone about their holiday plans. Even between native English speakers, talking about holiday plans is a really common topic of conversation because it's both safe and interesting. So, the first question you'll want to ask is if the other person is going on holiday. This is one of those situations in English where you can use the present continuous tense to have a future meaning. Instead of saying, "Are you going to go?" which is difficult to say, all you need to say is, "Are you going?" It means the same thing and is shorter and easier. So, you could of course ask, "Are you going on holiday this year?" This is fine, but there's actually another way we ask this question in English that sounds even more natural. "Are you going anywhere on holiday this year?" You can replace this year with another phrase. The most common is "this summer." So, how do you answer this question? If you're not going anywhere, for the most natural sounding reply, you can say, I'm staying at home this year. If you've already decided where you're going, you can reply with the name of the place and the month you're going, again using the present continuous or ing tense. Yeah, I'm going to Hawaii in July. What if you're definitely going somewhere on holiday, but you haven't yet decided where you're going? Then you can use useful little phrases like, I'm planning to go, and I'm thinking of going. If you have 2 or more places you're considering, you can use the phrase or maybe as a joining phrase. I'm planning to go to Hawaii or maybe Thailand. I'm thinking of going to Hawaii or maybe Thailand. So, what can you talk about once you've said where you're going on holiday? Well, you can say what you're planning to do there using the phrase I want to. I'm planning to go to Hawaii. I want to sunbathe. I'm planning to go to Thailand. I want to go shopping. A good follow-up question to this is asking how long the person will stay there for. Asking this is really simple. We often say, how long are you planning on staying? Or how long are you going for? Answering this question is really easy too. You don't need to repeat the question or say, I'm going for or I'm going to stay for. All you need to say is the length of time. How long are you going for? A week. 10 days. 2 weeks. Now it's time for Gina's tips. British speakers of English will use holiday as opposed to the American term vacation. Depending on where the native speaker of English is from, you might hear the word holiday, holidays, or even the colloquial term jollies. In this lesson, we learned how to ask and talk about vacation plans. In the next lesson, you'll learn how to ask about the relationship between 2 other people. And by doing this, make even more friends in English. Do you know how to ask about this? I'll be waiting for you in the next lesson. Hope you have enjoyed the reading. Please subscribe my channel.